Okay, I'll just put it. I'm not in a very much good environment. I just ran away from the sitting room. It's much better than this room I just ran into. Okay, so sign language. First of all, if you look at that picture on our first slide, how do those two people look? They look so happy, so excited. That's the beauty of sign language. The beauty of sign language is just so indescribable. If you learn sign language, if you observe sign language, then believe me, you have bliss, uncountable joy. That's the beauty of sign language. So sign language is a language like any other language. You jump into the facts, the precision, the details in today's lecture. And at the end of the lecture, I'll be very glad to have questions from everyone. So we can cross over to the next slide and begin our lecture, which is basic introduction, which I already did. The basic introduction about my names, I already did it at first. So we'll cross over to the next slide because we have already covered this part. So if you can look closer to the different names for sign language, there is the first point which states Zambian Sign Language, which is used ZSL, the abbreviation which is used. And then the next one, American Sign Language, the abbreviation used ASL. The third point, South African Sign Language, the abbreviation used is SASL. And then last, British Sign Language. The abbreviation is BSL. So this is just a simple example to say sign language can be different, which we'll look up into. So let's now cross over to the bigger picture now. Introduction to sign language. What's this thing, sign language? What's this sign language? Is it a language? Is it a fully fledged language like English language, Swahili, or maybe any other language worldwide? Let's find out what is sign language. Let's cross over to the next slide and then see. So the simple and precise definition for sign language is sign language is a gestro-visual language in which speakers express or communicate ideas by the movement of hands, fingers, head, facial features or facial expressions, and the body. This is sign language. This is the basic and simple definition of sign language. It is a language, and this language is a gesture language which uses visual and then expressions, ideas, by what? By the movement of hands, fingers, head, facial expressions or features, and body. That's the definition of sign language. And then to move over to the next point, it says sign language as a visual language cannot be defined like a speech language. No. What do they mean by sign language cannot be defined by a speech language? It's very simple. Here, what we mean is, in sign language, when we communicate with pure sign language, there's no need to use our mouth, our voice, no. So like any other language, sign language is a fully fledged language with its own grammar and rules. So just like English language is fully fledged, it's the same with sign language. It's got its own rules, grammatical features which we must follow when using the language, sign language, or when interpreting. And below, there are a few pictures to depict sign language. As you can see, hello, goodbye, yes, no, thanks, and so on. So we can move on to the next slide with Sir Avi and then see. Now, we cross over to another bigger picture. This sign language, I'm sure all of us have seen maybe deaf people use sign language, maybe in soccer matches, maybe a player scores and then he celebrates and then makes some signs upwards. But what really forms this sign language? what are what are those things which form this sign language? The first one is the manual alphabet. It's one of the major things that form sign language. On our right is a picture that depicts the manual alphabet. As you can see, it's from A to Z. This is one of the major things that form sign language, the manual alphabet. And then to continue, hand shapes. Now, I'll switch on my video, though the background is not, kindly forgive me for that. So the alphabet, I don't know if you can see me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. So about hand shapes, I'll quickly give a slight example, a simple example about hand shapes. If you can see my hand and compare the alphabet, this is B. It's letter B in sign language. It's also a hand shape B. And then if I just bend it slightly, it becomes bent B hand shape. You see where the relation is. And then if you look at numbers, for example, this is 5 in sign language. It's also a hand shape. It's called 5 hand shape. But what if I crow it like this? Then it becomes crow 5 hand shape or crooked 5 hand shape. So that difference tells us more about sign language. You don't just make up hand shapes and start, no, it's not magic, no. But there's specific hand shapes and specific signs when we go into sign language interpreting. And then the third point talks about sign language grammar. The same way you can't just wake up and start writing English in your own way you want. If you get a note today and start to write a sentence in English, I'm sure you move back to your grammar. You use a certain grammar which you learned in school. It's the same with sign language. You don't just interpret or maybe sign. No. It doesn't work like that. Sign language has its own grammar. Excuse me. So about the grammar of sign language, it is stated below. If you read just below, in sign language, there are words like is, it, the, and other words, they are excluded. It's just an example. For example, a sentence in English which says, I'm going to the market. That's a sentence in English language. I'm going to the market. So in sign language grammar, it will be me, market, go. You see the difference from I'm going to the market. But if I'm using sign language grammar, then it will be like me, market, go. You see that difference. So meaning sign language has its own grammar, its own grammatical features. And when you consider time and place in sign language, you find that the time in a sentence should always come first in professional sign language interpreting, followed by the place. You get the difference. So this states that sign language has its own grammar, just like English language or maybe any other language, Swahili or other languages you may know. So we'll move on to the next slide and see more about this sign language. The third slide. Who uses sign language? Who uses sign language? So if we look at sign language, we have already said it's a language like any other language. What does that mean? It means anyone uses this sign language. Even you, everyone who is part of today's lecture, can use sign language. And believe me, the happiness you absorb in your skin the day you grasp this sign language will be indescribable. It's not only deaf people who use sign language, no. So this relates to the next slide, which states the point, what I'm trying to put in. You see, it states deaf people and their family members, friends, hearing people born with deaf parents, and hearing persons in daily contact with the deaf as caregivers or service providers, e.g. teachers, police, and nurses, use sign language. It means anyone. You don't have to be deaf to use sign language, no? That's why we have, for example, sign language interpreters on TV, maybe policemen, men, women who use sign language to communicate with the deaf or maybe someone impaired of hearing. That's the entire idea of sign language. We all can learn sign language. If we have got the commitment, determination, and passion for sign language, we can learn and see its full value and then use it in our daily lives. That's the part of who uses sign language. So we'll move on to the next slide and see another interesting feature. Now we move to sign language interpreting. Sign language interpreting. What is this sign language interpreting? Let's see and find out more on the next slide as it is stated. Okay, so before we define sign language interpreting, if we look at the picture below, we see that lady, woman, she's interpreting. But is she alone? That's the question. Is she alone? No. If you look at the background, there's a speaker. So sign language interpreting is a profession in which an individual is trained to facilitate communication in a neutral manner, ensuring what? Equal access to information and participation. Meaning sign language interpreting, you as an interpreter who was trained to interpret what the speaker is interpreting. Not adding on what your emotions tell you or what you feel, but direct. That's why the word neutral is stated in a sentence. But another question can come in. Do all countries worldwide have sign language interpreting as a course in colleges, universities, or institutions? Nope. It does not work like that for all countries. So these countries which do not have sign language interpreting as a course in colleges, universities, how do interpreters learn sign language? The next point states below to say, by the help of associations or maybe organizations, they are the ones which train them. By an interpreter who was trained by someone who knows sign language, maybe from another country who was trained to train trainers of interpreters. That's the idea of sign language interpreting. So
Recording in progress.
So from this statement of sign language interpreting, I'm sure we've grasped the idea to say you don't just interpret out of your imagination or maybe out of your perspective, but you interpret what the speaker is saying. We'll cross over to the next slide and then look at another important fact. Wow. Look at this subheading. Do all deaf people know sign language? This is a very, very important and interesting question which we'll look at and discuss and then grasp the right concept about this. So the next slide will explain. Let's cross over to the next slide and see. So first, before we know if all deaf people know or maybe are able to use sign language, it is very important for us to know who is a deaf person. Who is a deaf person? So the simple definition of a deaf person is a person who cannot hear. And this condition has nothing to do with intelligence or the ability to think. So this connects to the point Brother Avi mentioned when introducing the lecture to say deaf and dumb. No, that statement is entirely wrong because someone who is deaf is not dumb. Someone who is deaf can never be dumb. But someone who is deaf is just someone who cannot hear. Someone who is deaf is someone like me, like you listening. Someone who is deaf can drive even an aeroplane. If you research so much, you see that some countries have got deaf people who are able to be even pilots. So someone who is deaf is not dumb, no. It's not someone who is foolish. It's not someone who is mentally impaired. It's not someone who has the brain backwards. No, 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 no. But someone who is deaf is someone like you and me. Is someone with his or her own language, which is the beautiful sign language. And then if we look closely, this deafness has got different degrees. So the 4 points state the different degrees of deafness. We have profound deafness, severe deafness, moderate deafness, slight, which is mild deafness, this type of deafness. And then profound deafness, what is this profound deafness? This type of deafness is a type of deafness where all hearing is lost. And then it's worse that a hearing aid cannot help. And then the second point is severe deafness. This deafness, it's a type of deafness where if we look at that hearing aid, it is a must. You must use a hearing aid. Without a hearing aid, then unfortunately nothing cannot be heard. And then there is moderate deafness. It's moderate, it's intermittent, it's 50-50. In this type of deafness, when someone is trying to, there are those difficulties in hearing when a person is whispering. These are type of people whereby when he or she is close to you, you have to shout or maybe move closer to try to speak so that they can hear or maybe be communicated to effectively. And then the last is slight, which is mild deafness. This is the type of deafness where in most cases it cannot be noticeable. It is just slight, intermittent. So you may not even notice it, which is intermittent deafness. So this covers who a deaf person is, which will move us to the next slide. Okay, interesting. We'll move now to the types. Now, what types? The types of hearing loss. So from the idea of deafness and types of hearing loss, I'm sure we're able to connect and see that deafness is never the same, because some of us maybe know the idea that someone who is deaf, they are just all the same. You are deaf, you just can't hear. But from these subheadings, I'm sure we can see and relate and know that there's not only one type of deafness, but these things are different. So what are they? First is conductive deafness. Conductive deafness. What is conductive deafness? In conductive deafness, the sound which you receive from the outer ear to the middle ear is blocked. Due to what? What blocks this sound? Things like blockage, and then something like damage, or maybe a disease in the ear. It can be the same type of conductive deafness. It can be sometimes treated depending on the situation or depending on the medical facility or hospital you are, how advanced you are. It can be sometimes treated. Not that they have used sometimes, meaning it varies. And then there's sensorial deafness. In this type of deafness, what is damaged? The inner ear is damaged, or the cochlear or auditory nerves, they are damaged. So after the damage of this, the inner ear, what then happens? Then sensorial deafness occurs. And then there is mixed deafness. In mixed deafness, in this type, we have two types of deafness. It's a combination of conductive and sensorial deafness. So a combination of these two makes mixed deafness. And then to continue, we have central deafness. In central deafness, the damage is in the part of the brain that processes sound, which is really bad when this happens. And then we move to progressive deafness. if we look at this progressive deafness, you don't just instantaneously lose your hearing ability. No. But this one happens gradually until one is completely deaf, which is related to the above mentioned. So this sums it up for the types of hearing loss, which will make us move to the next slide. Okay, interesting. This is getting more interesting. Now we move to the types of deaf people. We just mentioned that they are not the same. They are never the same. So if they are not the same, then what are the types of deaf people if they are not the same? The first one is prelingual deafness. So this type of deaf people who fall under the heading or maybe under the kind prelingual, these are born deaf, or maybe I can say it in a way they are born deaf, and this happens before they have learned a language, not like us. So it happens before they have learned a language. Someone is just born deaf, which is prelingual deafness. And then there is postlingual deafness. What's this postlingual deafness? So this happens after someone has known a spoken language, or maybe due to disease or something, and then you become deaf. So it happens at a certain time, maybe after you've learned the language, and then you become deaf. Like you are, maybe you're able to speak now, you're able to hear, and then in future you become deaf. That's prelingual deafness. And then there's the other one, which is hard of hearing. With hard of hearing, this type of deafness, it can be amplified by what? By a hearing aid, or maybe you raise your voice. Related to what we're from explaining, when you raise your voice, it can be amplified. And then the last one, deaf blind. These use dactyl to communicate, related to the blind language. Yeah, they use dactyl to communicate. That's deaf blind, someone who is both deaf and blind. So for this one, it's a combination, deaf blind. And then this sums it up for types of deaf people, which will make us move to the next slide. Okay, so now, as we continue, this deafness can't just be happening out of the blue. What really causes it? You don't just wake up and you're deaf. No. So there are four major things which make an individual deaf. The first one is an infection. A disease can make you deaf. Depending on the type of a disease, it can make you deaf. Maybe it can damage your inner ear, or maybe part of the nervous system that triggers your hearing. And then the second one is an accident. Imagine you're in an accident and then boom, your ear is damaged after an accident. Then probably you will become deaf. And then genetics also contribute. Maybe it's in the genetic line with maybe the family, stuff like that. Then you can become a deaf person. And then the last one is consistent exposure to noise. When a person is consistently exposed to too much noise for a long time, then what happens? That person will probably become deaf. So from here, I'm sure we have grasped some idea about sign language. We have grasped something about sign language, maybe opposite to the myths which we knew. But then another question lies. If not all deaf people know sign language, then what are the psychosocial barriers that make some deaf people to know sign language, some not to know sign language? So it comes back to child psychology, how that child was raised. What's his impact? So how a parent or guardian raises a child who is deaf, it plays a major role on them knowing sign language or not. It can have an influence on the language development. I'll give this example. There are two children. One is born with a parent who is deaf. And then these two deaf children, you get it, eh? There are two deaf children. One is born with a parent who is deaf, and the other one is born with a hearing parent. It's obvious that this first child who is born with a parent who is deaf will know sign language, and there will be a very, very good and significant positive impact about child development. But this other one, who is born of a hearing parent, it will depend on that hearing parent to teach that, or maybe to learn sign language, so that that parent or guardian can teach the deaf child sign language. But what happens if that hearing parent fails to learn sign language? Then there will be a major impact on language development about that deaf child. So to cut it short, not all deaf people know sign language. No. It depends with how that deaf child was raised. That's why if you meet a deaf person in the street today, you see that the type of sign language they use maybe it's just basic or iconic. It just depends. So it depends on back then how they were raised, and how they were raised has an impact on their language development and has a greater impact on their academic performance, or maybe how they behave in the society and other aspects of life, because language development was an issue. Imagine I'm raising this child minus language development. I'm not teaching my baby, no, this is a cup, this is a what. Imagine how a baby can grow without language. That's why maybe some people end up saying deaf and dumb, because maybe they've met some deaf people who are deprived of language development, and they grew up minus that priceless price of the language. So we can't really blame people who say deaf and dumb. It's wrong, but maybe they've met a deaf person who grew up without language development. And imagine growing up without a positive language development. It will impact your grades, how you view things in your society, your mental status, and a lot. So it's not entirely their fault. No. But it depends on how they were raised, how a certain parent raised them. Did that parent choose to learn sign language and help the deaf child to have a good language development? It depends on what you feel. So all in all, we can see the importance of sign language as a parent to both hearing and not hearing parents. The importance of sign language cannot be seen as trash or what. The importance of sign language is so indescribable to you and to me, to your country, to Africa, and to the world. The importance of sign language is so valuable. So to conclude, we'll move to the next slide and see what it offers us. Okay. So now, is sign language universal? Wow, what an interesting question. Is sign language universal? Does the entire world, the whole world, use the same sign language? The answer is very simple and straightforward. No, sign language is not universal. But why isn't sign language not universal? Why can't we just make one sign language and use it in the entire world, use it too? Why? Let's see what it offers. So you say countries worldwide have different sign languages, but why? I'm a Zambian, for example, and maybe you and me come from different countries. Do we have the same culture? No. The same lifestyle? No. The same staple of food? No. The same cars used in our country? In short, we have got different cultures, different aspects of life. And that has got a greater impact on sign language. Why do I say so? Because, for example, how we cook here in Zambia, maybe the tools we use for cooking and the tools you may use in your country, They're different. Meaning the sign for maybe cooking, it will be different because signs are made from real life. Most signs, not all signs, but most signs are made from real life, from our cultures, what we see, and then we make a sign. So if we have got different cultures, then there's no way we can have the same sign language. You see, huh? So it varies sign language from American sign language to British sign language. Though an important factor we must consider is that some signs are same and similar. Some signs are adapted from the famous American sign language. Today, I'm not here to mention about the history of sign language. No. I'm just stating the basics. Maybe a time will come in future, maybe if I'm offered an opportunity. But we're not into history of sign language, but we adapt some signs, for example, here in Zambia, from American sign language. Not all, but some. So sign language is not universal. All countries have got different sign language. Zambian sign language is different. South African sign language is different. Namibian sign language is different. I'm an expert in sign language, a qualified sign language interpreter, but that does not make me to go in Namibia and communicate effectively. No, I'll miss out on a lot of things because sign language is different. That sums this up. And then let's look at the next slide and see how we conclude with it. What's the importance of sign language? This is our last part. My beloved brothers and sisters, the importance of sign language is so important, so indescribable. And the good part is you and me can learn sign language. Today, if you are so much interested, you've got the passion, you can learn that sign language. And the feeling of learning sign language is just so wonderful. It's the same feeling of flying without wings because, you can tell me the day you learn sign language. Imagine talking with your hands, not with your mouth. You talk with your hands here, not with your mouth. Your emotions, you talk with your hands. That's what makes sign language unique. Look, a lot of people, maybe 90% of the world, uses the mouth to talk. But imagine you're using your hands to talk. Wow, that's so unique. You're using your mouth to talk. And you're using your eyes to hear. You're using your eyes to hear. You see how unique sign language is? So unique. So what's its importance? Learning sign language, one, it will help you know it and have an added advantage because you know another language, which is sign language. You probably know it. And then another impact is it will impact, if a lot of people know sign language, especially teachers who are in special education, for example, then it will enable them to have that ability to communicate effectively because not all countries have got sign language interpreting as a course in special education. No, not all countries. So if special education teachers have got that added advantage of sign language interpreting, meaning they will be able to communicate effectively to deaf students, to deaf pupils. And furthermore, it will impact the development of our countries who will have more sign language interpreters. We won't lack sign language interpreting. And lastly, effective communication will be guaranteed to both the hearing and the deaf. Meaning the deaf will be also effectively communicated. Thank you so much. I'm so humbled.
Thank you so much, Mr. Andrew. I really loved the presentation on sign language, and I'm really hoping to learn how to communicate in sign. I was already doing some gestures with my hands. I mean, if I can get to a point where I can express myself not only with my mouth but also with my hands, it will really be an important thing for me as well, because I have met so many deaf people, and Sometimes I remember I was in the metro last time and I was a deaf person and I couldn't communicate to them. And it was very difficult, to meet an entire person who you can actually bond with. But because of this barrier, and I realized that, okay, I have to make an effort to learn it as well. And we have a lot of people in Africa, millions of people who do not have basically ability to hear. And in many of our TV channels also, we do not take account. I think it's mostly in South Africa. When I was watching South African TV, they always put a sign language interpreter on the side, on the news, even in Zambian TV. But in many cases, we do not incorporate such kind of things. So also looking at, in the future, to see how we can really communicate our messages, to everybody, because we're all Africans. So I really appreciate you so much, Mr. Andrew, for that. We'll open the floor to questions. If anybody has a question for Mr. Andrew, keep it under 45 seconds to a minute, and any additions or clarifications under a minute, and then Mr. Andrew will be able to answer your questions. And then we can then come to the end of our session.
Greetings all. Kamako, for me, it's not a question. For me, it's just a comment of to say that sign language, it's something that we as a nation and as human race, we have been using for best of our times. It's just that maybe it was never really documented or recognized as a sign language. Secondly, I think it's something that I don't know what platforms can be used for it to be a language that every African or every person needs to learn as part of the languages. It shouldn't be only a vocal language that we learn. We also need to learn about sign language. And pardon me, my daughter is just happy here. And the third thing is that I was listening to him when he was narrating the slides. I noticed that most of the time with the sign language, you use your hands. And for me, it came to also when he was explaining about people who use sign language, most of them, they're classified as deaf and dumb or whatever. That's that way of discriminating the sign language people. For me, it came to say that on a bigger picture, to say, when the creator creates the people, or creator creates the nation or human race, they know exactly how and why they give certain elements or certain senses more than others. So in a case whereby when you find somebody who may not be able to hear, maybe they are deaf, but they are good in something. Others, they cannot see, but their senses are very good. So in a case whereby you cannot be able to speak, then always a matter of you can use your hands to be able to still communicate. Where if a case whereby your voice is you're not vocal about what you want to do. So for me, it just made me to think of the greatness and the intelligence of the creator when it comes to that. So I'm just throwing it to the group and to those who might be interested to take this initiative of trying to see how best can sign language can be a language that we don't feel ashamed to learn, and it becomes part of the syllabus at schools that even our kids can learn to at a young age learn sign language, and so that when they're grown-ups, it can also be a better way of having it as a language that is respected, not as a language that is, oh, by the way, shame they can't speak.
Thank you so much, Dr. Woko. That was beautiful. We have a hand from Brother Odell. Anybody who has a question, just raise your hand. We have Brother Odell. Brother Odell, over to you.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. It's a great comment of the previous speaker, Zukiwa. Beautiful. That's. I agree 100% with that. You could use the sign language as an extra language, as an extra skills. If people can learn that, and black people usually can, we have better ability, better talents to learn visual language. And yeah, this is a great strategy to have like a common language in the entire continent for the next generation, so that we could have an edge to, let me say, if we have to fight for our lives, we could still communicate with each other without the enemy to understand what we are saying. So we don't have to follow Western lifestyle. You don't have to follow the Western culture. If this could be in the syllabus and could be expanded, we could have more people looking into this and training the masses how to speak sign language is a great asset, I would say. So that is one comment I would like to make. I think it's a very good idea to bring this up. It's, I did not know that actually they had a complete alphabet for in sign language. It's just completely blow my mind away just now. So yeah, I'm still trembling. Anyway, I have a comment on the slide. If I think it's the slide 1 or 2 up front is where the causes of death. I think maybe one back or one front, the cause of death. And I had a comment about that. How you get. I think was it not there? The causes of genetically, yeah. Looking, you see here number C. What is it based on? I mean, we know now that when children are born in the hospital, they immediately get an injection from the vaccine. Yeah, so I think maybe that should be looked in. That why should God make people deaf? That's not something genetically. That's just somebody say that, and everybody repeating what somebody say. They're just parroting, and then that does not make it real because everybody says that. Yes, I think it's genetically, when you look into that as if that's in the literature, it may be false. I think it's through the vaccine directly. People don't born deaf. Yes, because your ear, you have 5 senses, and those are they're crucial to be a human being, to live like human, what we're meant to do. So I don't believe that a creator would create somebody imperfect and make them deaf for their whole life. That is.
Thank you so much for that, brother.
And one more thing I would like to add, 30 seconds. The slide with the flags. You have some hands with some flags on it. Yeah, there. Or the other one, I think the one with the more, that we had multiple flags. There, I think it shocked me that we as African people, we should look the world through African glasses, to black glasses. We should not have looking at all these European. Okay, I see Iran, I see Brazil, but all the rest is all European hands. We should not be worshiping them. Yeah, that is what we should. The first step of decolonization, mind decolonization, is to look and respect and love everything what is dark, what is brown, what is black, what have color, not this color.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for that. Yeah, but Mr. Mtonga, you heard Brother's question on the people being born blind. Mr. Mtonga, do you think, like he says, can God, our Creator, make someone imperfect? I mean, like deaf. Mr. Mtonga, over to you.
Okay, I got the question. So that's the question can be petitioned on science and religion. So when he talks about the Creator, I don't know if he's talking about God, the Creator, because the point of genetics about someone being born deaf it's scientifically proven. So if he says that it's not true, or then I'm not in the right place to add or argue or do what, because I was taught when being trained, and they were taught, and the people who taught them these, it's under scientific proof and evidence. So I grasped that idea. And unless if I was a scientist, then I would justify that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mtonga. Any other question from anybody else or contribution? You can just jump right in.
That's the point about the scientific part of it, because that's what I like to look into. And the scientific part of it shows now that the vaccines are dangerous. We're just misled, and the vaccines, their cause of autism, it's proven that they have toxic substance in it. And because of the drug effect, that doesn't necessarily make that your body would react to it immediately. It takes sometimes months or years to develop its effect. And it will go, you have even aluminum when it goes to your brains, the aluminum from the vaccine, yes, liquid aluminum, that could cause autism. That is proven, scientifically proven. You go to the CDC, the American CDC website, it has that. So, but people are only saying, yes, people are genetically born deaf. No, show me evidence that this person born deaf, and show me evidence that they had no connection with modern medication, with Western medication.
That's a very good input, brother. Let's get back to you on that just in a few seconds. We have a question from Brother Kagiso. Brother Kagiso, if you can come in, give a question or a comment before we move on. Brother Kagiso. Brother Kagiso, you can put on your mic. Yeah.
Okay. I actually believe that humankind is still backwards because we do not speak one language. If you remember the story from the Bible, there was a time when humans spoke one language, and they decided that they want to be close to God, and they actually decided to build a tower that would reach all the way to heaven. And in that story, God saw what the humans were doing, and he decided that, okay, in order to make sure that these people do not reach me, I will confuse them and make them all speak different languages. And as soon as that
Sorry, Brother Kagiso, put on your mic again. Sorry for that. Can you? Yeah, sorry for that. Go on.
The building stopped. So that story to me shows me how having a common language can actually, or having unity amongst people actually can essentially makes the sky the limit. That why, if we are united in something, that nothing can stop us. I'm wondering I want to ask the brother, does he believe that it's possible that maybe sign language may be the key for humanity to construct a common language?
Yeah, Mr. Mtonga, over to you.
Okay, so you ask if sign language can be the key for humanity to construct a language which coordinates for or maybe unites all.
Yes.
Okay, so for that point, I can't really justify or maybe give you a specific answer. Why do I say so? Because sign language is one of the many languages the world knows. I'm sure you and I know.
Yes.
So being vast the languages, I can't really say this language is the key, this language is not the key, because it was even not the first language which man entirely used. So I can't really know if it can be the key or it can be the key for uniting humanity.
Okay.
But why would humanity need to unite? I mean, we would never be united. We were all made in God's image, different. So why we have to unite? That's what the globalists want, to unite the world in a one world government with a one world religion, one world socialist system where they're under dictatorship, where you don't have no culture. You have no black culture. Yes, your history has been rewritten many times, and now we write again. Yeah, so we will never unite. We have to unite by our race. White people unite their race. Chinese people unite their race. Indians do the same. Jewish people do the same. They unite by their own race. Arab people do the same. Palestinians, they're the only one who not, and black people. You know, and but even they're trying to unite. So why can Africa not unite? We did not make those borders. The borders is just an illusional barrier that the Europeans put in our minds. Yes, we could just go over the border. We could just trade with each other.
Absolutely. But I think let's try to stay in the context of sign language, and then let's have the debate on the other topic after the presentation, because we're going to move out of the topic, and then maybe we can let Mr. Mtonga finish off, and then maybe we can discuss more deeper in that. We have a question from Mr. Ndai. Mr. Ndai, yes.
Yes, thank you, Brother Andrew, for that presentation. I just wanted to ask that, so if someone was to start learning sign language, which one would you recommend they start with? Since you said there's so many different ones from different countries, people. So if I'm just someone who I think that, like, after this presentation, I'd really like to start learning sign language, where would I start?
Over to you, Mr. Mtonga.
Okay, wonderful question. So if you want to learn sign language today, you decided that I want to learn sign language. The first question that I might ask you is, which country are you from?
I'm from Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. So if you're from Zimbabwe, if you want to learn sign language, then if it burns in you the desire, the passion, then you learn. And then where you start from, I'll mention 2 or 3 things. First is deaf interaction. I know it sounds weird because you don't know sign language. You have to interact with the deaf. And then, if possible, find someone who knows sign language. Going over the basics and stuff.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Mtonga, you there? I think, yes.
If you find some, you can get me. You can get me.
Yeah, we can get you.
Yes,
Going.
okay.
If you find someone who knows sign language, and then you interact with the deaf, then you combine something you learned from that someone, and then try to communicate with the deaf. Believe me, they become so happy when they see you try. Even your trying is a prize to them. And from there, if you want to develop your skills, you can go for sign language, professional sign language interpreting, which will even sharpen your skills more greater and good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have a hand from our deaf brother, yes.
I have a question about the sign language. When you have the, for instance, if I am a Dutch, I speak Dutch, and I want to communicate with somebody from Tanzania, and there's Swahili probably, and in sign language, if you have the A, it's a different A in Tanzania, a B, a different B. How could we then come to a common language? Because it's I understand there's an alphabet, but then again, we use the alphabet here, different pronunciation and different meaning. So how could that be synchronized? Understand my question?
Mr. Mtonga, over to you.
Okay, wonderful question. How can it be synchronized? So, I don't know how much you've browsed about sign language. The alphabet which we depicted in this lecture is the American Manual Sign Language, which is used by almost all the African countries. The only different alphabet is the British Sign Language alphabet. It's the only one different. Yeah, this one depicted. It's used almost worldwide, this alphabet, this manual alphabet. And what you must keep in mind is that this is just the alphabet. It's not communicating. This alphabet only helps you, 1, to spell something, and 2, in case you forget a sign, you finger spell it using here. the letters which are here. So if you want to communicate with someone in another country, then yeah, it becomes critical because you must use those universal signs which are similar and which are same. Thank you.
Wonderful. I think we're coming to the end of our session today. Any comment from brother here? Brother here is also with us.
No, nothing from me. Thanks, Brother Avi.
Thank you. Now we'll have some last remarks from everybody else, and then Mr. Mtonga can close for us, and then we'll definitely continue our discussion in the group as usual. We can start with Mr. Kagiso. Your last remarks.
Sorry, put up my hand instead of unmuting my mic. But I think I myself am also quite interested in languages. I noticed that the structure of sign language of subject, object, verb is actually similar to the Malagasy language, and there are also many other languages that have a similar structure. And I actually think, I'm also a teacher. I work with young children, and I noticed reading can often be a big problem, and the big problem becomes because a lot of children don't actually know the alphabet. So I actually see what the brother spoke about, how it is actually important to have someone in the household that actually knows the language and can actually pass this on to the children. So in the case of the children that I find that are unable to read, it's always a case that at home, the parents do not actually take the time to go and teach them the ABCs, and that actually affects their development at school, because now at school, because the teachers are focusing on like 20 students, they often don't have the time to focus on this individual student and make sure that they know their ABC. And it can even reach to a point where a person goes all the way to high school without ever being able to read. So I do see the point that the brother has made, and yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say.
Thank you so much, brother Edu. Any remarks from brother Edu? Edu is not here. Any last remarks from you, brother Odell, before we close for today?
No, I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, brother Odell. Mr. Ndai?
No, thank you. No last remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Andrew Mtonda, and your last remarks for tonight before we end?
My last remarks are that I'm really happy to see everyone, to know from everyone, and to hear from everyone here. And believe me, sign language is very important language. The day you learn sign language, you know that it's really, really priceless. It's really a good language. And I've learned a lot from you all. I've really learned a lot, and I'm really happy. Thank you so much. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Oh, that was beautiful, Brother Mtonga. Thank you so much, everyone. We can continue discussions in our Zola Bantu group. Next week, we'll have some more lectures next week as well. We have already combined the chapters of Zola Bantu Foundation course into one book. I think I sent in the group. Have some time to read also. And try to encourage each member in the group, text them privately, find out how they're doing. Let's have that kind of connection among us.